young millionaire left by his model wife for infertility, now became father of triplet. The champagne flute trembled in his hand as 3 tiny heartbeats echoed through the ultrasound room, shattering every cruel word his ex-wife had ever spoken about his broken dreams of fatherhood. Before we get deep into the story, please let me know in the comment where you're watching from. Hit subscribe if you're hooked in and ready to enjoy this story, because tomorrow I have another beautiful story to share with you and I don't want you to miss it for anything. Now, let's get into the story. The October rain drummed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse office, each droplet a reminder of the storm that had torn through Ryan Mitchell's life 18 months ago. At 32, he sat behind a mahogany desk worth more than most people's cars, his steel-gray eyes fixed on the financial reports that no longer held the same thrill they once did. The numbers were impressive. His tech company, Mitch Tech Solutions, had just closed a $40 million acquisition, but success felt hollow when you had no one to share it with. Mr. Mitchell. His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom, pulling him from his brooding. Your appointment with Dr. Harrison is in 30 minutes. Ryan's jaw tightened. Another fertility specialist, another round of tests, another confirmation of what he already knew. The irony wasn't lost on him. A man who could solve the most complex technological problems couldn't fix the one thing that mattered most. What do you think drives someone to keep trying when they've faced so much disappointment? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The memory hit him like a physical blow. Vanessa's perfectly manicured hand sliding her wedding ring across their marble kitchen counter, her emerald eyes cold as winter frost. I can't waste my prime years waiting for a miracle that's never coming, Ryan. My modeling career has maybe 5 good years left, and I refuse to spend them playing house with a man who can't give me children. He'd offered alternatives, adoption, surrogacy, treatments, but Vanessa Chen Mitchell had already made up her mind. She wanted the picture-perfect family for her social media empire, complete with her own biological children bearing her flawless genes. When the third fertility specialist delivered the devastating news about Ryan's condition, she'd started planning her exit strategy. The divorce had been swift and surgical, orchestrated by her team of lawyers with the precision of a military operation. She'd taken half his liquid assets, $22 million, and disappeared into the arms of a European soccer player who'd already given her the one thing Ryan never could, a child. Ryan pushed back from his desk, the Italian leather chair creaking softly. His reflection caught in the window, 6'2" frame still athletic despite months of neglecting the gym, sandy brown hair slightly tousled, and those gray eyes that had once sparked with ambition now dulled by loss. The successful businessman facade remained intact, but underneath, he was just another broken man whose dreams had crumbled. The drive to Dr. Harrison's office through downtown Seattle felt like a funeral procession. Ryan's Tesla moved silently through the rain-slick streets, past coffee shops filled with young families and playgrounds where children's laughter pierced the gray afternoon. Each sight was a reminder of what he'd never have. Dr. Harrison's office occupied the top floor of the Fertility and Family Medicine Center, its waiting room designed to inspire hope with soft lighting and motivational posters. Ryan had seen too many of these rooms, spoken to too many specialists who promised miracles they couldn't deliver. Mr. Mitchell. Dr. Harrison emerged from his office, a kind-faced man in his 50s whose gentle demeanor couldn't mask the weight of the news he typically delivered. Thank you for coming in. I've reviewed all your previous tests and consulted with several colleagues. They settled into the familiar dance of medical consultation. Charts, percentages, treatment options that grew more experimental and less hopeful with each passing month. Ryan listened with the detached interest of someone who'd heard it all before. I want to be honest with you, Dr. Harrison said finally, removing his glasses and cleaning them slowly. Given your specific condition and the previous treatment attempts, the likelihood of natural conception remains extremely low. We're talking about less than 2%. 2%. Ryan had built a fortune on better odds than that, but when it came to fatherhood, those numbers felt like a death sentence. However, Dr. Harrison continued, I don't want you to give up hope entirely. Medicine advances every day, and there are new experimental treatments on the horizon. Sometimes, against all odds, miracles do happen. Ryan nodded mechanically, the same empty gesture he'd perfected over countless similar conversations. "Thank you, Doctor. I'll consider my options." But as he walked back through the rain toward his car, Ryan knew he was done considering. He'd exhausted every medical avenue, spent over $200,000 on treatments, and endured the emotional roller coaster of false hope too many times. It was time to accept reality. He would never be a father. The penthouse felt like a mausoleum when he returned that evening. 3,500 square feet of luxury designed for a family that would never exist. The spare bedrooms he'd mentally decorated as nurseries remained untouched, their potential forever unrealized. Ryan poured himself 3 fingers of 25-year-old scotch and stood on his balcony, watching the city lights blur through the rain. Below, Seattle hummed with life, families heading home from soccer practice, couples pushing strollers through the drizzle, the endless cycle of life that had somehow passed him by. His phone buzzed with a text from his brother Jake. "Mom's asking again about when you're going to give her grandchildren. I told her to back off, but you know how she is." Ryan deleted the message without responding. How could he explain that the dream of carrying on the Mitchell family name had died in a sterile doctor's office, dissected by clinical terminology and statistical impossibilities? The scotch burned as it went down, but it couldn't numb the deeper ache. Ryan had conquered every challenge in his professional life through determination and intelligence, but biology didn't care about his MBA from Stanford or his ability to turn startups into gold mines. Some problems couldn't be solved with money or willpower. A knock at the door interrupted his brooding. Ryan wasn't expecting anyone, and his doorman typically announced visitors. Through the peephole, he saw a young black woman in her late 20s, her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, wearing scrubs that marked her as medical personnel. "Mr. Mitchell." Her voice was warm but professional when he opened the door. "I'm Amora Johnson from Seattle General's Fertility Research Division. Dr. Harrison gave me your contact information. I hope I'm not intruding, but I wanted to speak with you about a new treatment protocol we're developing." Ryan's first instinct was to politely decline. He'd heard enough about experimental treatments to fill a medical journal, and each one had led to the same dead end. But something about this woman, maybe it was the quiet confidence in her dark brown eyes or the way she stood with her shoulders squared despite obviously being nervous, made him pause. "I appreciate you coming by, Ms. Johnson, but I think I've exhausted all my options." "Please," she said, shifting a folder from one hand to the other. "Just 5 minutes. What I'm proposing isn't another treatment for you to undergo. It's something completely different, something that could help both of us." Against his better judgment, Ryan stepped aside and let her enter. Amora looked around the penthouse with the wide-eyed expression of someone unaccustomed to such luxury, but she quickly composed herself and focused on why she'd come. "I'll be direct, Mr. Mitchell. I'm a fertility researcher, but I'm also a single woman who wants children. I've spent the last 3 years developing a new approach to assisted reproduction, and I need a partner, not romantic, but someone willing to participate in a groundbreaking procedure that could benefit us both." Ryan studied her carefully. Amora was beautiful in an understated way, with high cheekbones and full lips that suggested mixed heritage. But it was her intelligence that struck him most, the way she spoke with scientific precision while maintaining an underlying warmth that felt genuine. "What exactly are you proposing?" Amora opened her folder and spread several documents on his coffee table. "I've developed a revolutionary technique that combines advanced genetic therapy with a new form of IVF. It's shown remarkable success in preliminary trials, but I need the right partner to move forward with human testing." Ryan felt the familiar flutter of hope trying to take root in his chest, but he forced it down. "Ms. Johnson, I've been told by multiple specialists that my condition makes fatherhood impossible. What makes you think your technique would work where others have failed?" "Because," Amora said, meeting his eyes directly, "I'm not trying to fix what's broken. I'm trying to work around it entirely. And if it succeeds, Mr. Mitchell, you wouldn't just become a father, you'd become the father of multiple children. The room fell silent except for the rain still pattering against the windows. Ryan stared at the documents spread before him, scientific charts and graphs that might as well have been written in hieroglyphics for all the sense they made to him. But the possibility, no matter how remote, hung in the air like a lifeline thrown to a drowning man. "Tell me more," he said quietly. Amora's hands moved gracefully over the documents as she explained her revolutionary technique, her voice carrying the passion of someone who dedicated her life to solving the impossible. Ryan found himself drawn not just to her words, but to the way her dark eyes lit up when she discussed the science, the subtle way she gestured to emphasize key points, and the quiet determination that radiated from her small frame. "Traditional fertility treatments focus on enhancing what's already there," she explained, pointing to a complex diagram. "But my approach bypasses the conventional pathways entirely. Instead of trying to improve sperm motility or count, we use advanced genetic scaffolding to create a completely new reproductive framework." Ryan leaned forward, studying the charts. The technical language was beyond his expertise, but the implications were staggering. "You're talking about gene therapy." "Not exactly." Amora's fingers traced along a series of molecular structures. "I'm talking about creating artificial genetic carriers that can house and protect reproductive material through a process I call genomic incubation. Think of it as building a biological bridge where none existed before." The rain had intensified outside, creating a cocoon of intimacy in the vast penthouse. Ryan noticed how Amora had unconsciously moved closer as she explained her work, her shoulder almost brushing his as she pointed to different sections of her research. "The preliminary trials showed remarkable success," she continued. "But there's a catch. The process requires specific genetic compatibility between partners, and the treatment itself is intensive." "Intensive how?" Amora sat back, her professional demeanor softening slightly. 6 months of synchronized hormone therapy, weekly procedures, and complete lifestyle modifications. It's not just a medical treatment, Mr. Mitchell. It would be a partnership in every sense of the word. Ryan studied her face, searching for the catch that always seemed to accompany miracle cures. "Why me? Surely there are other candidates for your research." A flush crept up Amora's neck, and for the first time since she'd arrived, she seemed uncertain. "I've been following your case for months through Dr. Harrison's referral network. Your specific genetic markers are exactly what I need for the trial to work. But beyond that..." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I've researched you extensively, Mr. Mitchell. Your determination, your success despite obstacles, those qualities matter for what would be undertaking." "You researched me." Ryan couldn't decide whether to be flattered or concerned. "Professional research," Amora clarified quickly. "I needed to ensure any potential partner had the emotional resilience for this process. The treatment can be physically and psychologically demanding." Ryan stood and walked to the window, watching the city lights blur through the rain-streaked glass. Behind him, he could hear Amora organizing her papers, the soft rustle of documents mixing with the storm outside. The rational part of his mind screamed warnings. This was too convenient, too perfect, too much like the false hopes that had already shattered his world once. But another part of him, the part that had built an empire from a college dorm room idea, recognized something genuine in Amora's proposal. This wasn't another doctor offering incremental improvements to failed treatments. This was a revolutionary leap into uncharted territory. "What's your success rate?" he asked without turning around. "In animal trials, 87%. But Mr. Mitchell, this would be the first human application." Ryan turned to face her. "So I'd be a guinea pig." "We both would be." Amora's honesty was refreshing after months of medical professionals dancing around hard truths. "I can't guarantee success, but I can promise that if it works, the results will exceed anything you've been told is possible. And if it fails, then we're no worse off than we are now." Ryan studied her for a long moment. Amora met his gaze steadily, and he saw something there that he recognized. The same desperate hope he'd been carrying for years, tempered by scientific discipline but no less powerful for its restraint. "Why children?" he asked suddenly. "You're young, successful, beautiful. You could have any life you wanted. Why risk everything on an experimental procedure?" Amora's composure cracked slightly, revealing a vulnerability that made her seem younger. "Because I've spent my entire career helping other people have families while watching my own biological clock tick away. I'm 28, Mr. Mitchell. I've devoted 8 years to fertility research, and I've never even tried to have children of my own." She stood and moved to stand beside him at the window, their reflections ghost-like in the rain-streaked glass. "My grandmother raised 7 children while working 3 jobs. My mother sacrificed her dreams to raise me alone after my father left. I've spent my life surrounded by women who found ways to make families work against impossible odds, and I refuse to let science be the thing that stops me." The passion in her voice stirred something in Ryan that had been dormant since his divorce. Here was someone who understood the ache of unfulfilled dreams, who'd channeled that pain into something constructive rather than letting it consume her. What would the timeline look like? He heard himself asking. Amora turned to face him fully, and he caught a hint of barely controlled excitement in her expression. 3 months of preparation, genetic testing, hormone regulation, lifestyle modifications. Then the procedure itself, followed by 3 months of monitoring and support. "And you believe this could result in multiple pregnancies?" The genomic incubation process naturally encourages multiple embryo development. In our trials, 60% of successful procedures resulted in twins or triplets. Have you ever had to decide between playing it safe and taking a leap of faith that could change everything? What made you choose? Let us know in the comments. Ryan felt the familiar war between hope and fear raging in his chest. Every rational thought told him this was madness, trusting his deepest dream to an unproven procedure with a woman he'd met an hour ago. But the alternative was accepting a childless future, and that felt like a different kind of death. "I need to know more about you," he said finally. "If we're going to be partners in this, I need to understand who I'm partnering with." Amora nodded. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. Your background, your motivations, your fears. If I'm going to trust you with my genetic material and my last hope for fatherhood, I need to know the woman behind the science." They spent the next hour talking as the storm raged outside. Amora told him about growing up in Oakland, the daughter of a single mother who worked as a nurse while putting herself through medical school. She'd been the first person in her family to earn a PhD, driven by a childhood spent watching her mother struggle to conceive again after a series of miscarriages. "I was supposed to have siblings," she said softly, curled into the corner of his leather sofa with a cup of coffee warming her hands. "My mother tried for years after I was born, but her body just couldn't. I watched her blame herself, watched her marriage fall apart because of it. I swore I'd find a way to help women like her." Ryan shared his own story, the golden childhood as the heir to a successful family business, the pressure to carry on the Mitchell legacy, the devastating discovery that he might be the end of a family line that stretched back 5 generations. Vanessa wasn't wrong to leave, he admitted, surprising himself with the honesty. "I can't give a woman a normal family. I can't offer the white picket fence and the mini-me running around the backyard. Maybe I was selfish to expect her to sacrifice that dream for me. Or maybe," Amora said quietly, "she wasn't the right person to build something extraordinary with." Their eyes met across the coffee table, and Ryan felt a shift in the air between them. This wasn't just about science anymore, wasn't just about 2 people with compatible genetic markers coming together for a clinical procedure. There was something deeper happening, a connection that went beyond their shared desire for children. "Tell me about the risks," he said, needing to ground himself in practical concerns before his emotions carried him away. Amora's expression grew serious. "For you, the hormone therapy could cause mood swings, weight gain, and some discomfort during the genetic sampling procedures. For me, the risks are higher, multiple pregnancy complications, potential long-term effects from the experimental drugs, and the possibility that my body could reject the entire process. You could die. I could die crossing the street tomorrow. Life doesn't come with guarantees, Mr. Mitchell. But I'd rather risk everything for a chance at the family I want than live safely with the regret of never trying. Ryan stood and began pacing, a habit from his business negotiations when he needed to think clearly. If we do this, and I'm not saying yes yet, what happens afterward? If the procedure works and you become pregnant, what's our arrangement? Are we co-parents? Do I have legal rights? What about financial responsibilities? We'd need legal contracts, Amora acknowledged. But my hope is that we'd figure it out as we go. I'm not looking for a husband, Mr. Mitchell, and I'm not looking for a meal ticket. I'm looking for a partner in creating life and raising children who know they're wanted by both their parents. The word parents hit Ryan like a physical blow. For so long, the idea of being called dad had seemed like an impossible dream. Now, sitting in his penthouse with this brilliant, determined woman, it felt tantalizingly close to reality. I need time to think, he said finally. Amora nodded and began gathering her papers. Of course. This is a huge decision. As she prepared to leave, Ryan found himself reluctant to let her go. The penthouse would feel even emptier after their conversation, after the glimpse of possibility she'd offered. Amora, he called as she reached the door. If we do this, what's our first step? She turned back with a smile that transformed her entire face. Genetic compatibility testing. We need to make sure we're actually compatible before we start dreaming about babies. After she left, Ryan stood in his empty penthouse and tried to process what had just happened. In the span of 2 hours, his entire future had shifted from resigned acceptance to cautious hope. The scientific skeptic in him demanded more research, more consultations, more proof that this wasn't just another expensive dead end. But the dreamer in him, the part that had been buried under months of medical failures and his ex-wife's cruel words, was already imagining cribs in his spare bedrooms and family photos on his walls. He walked to his home office and opened his laptop, diving into research on Amora Johnson. Her credentials were impeccable. PhD in reproductive biology from Johns Hopkins, fellowship at the Mayo Clinic, published researcher with articles in prestigious medical journals. Her work on genetic therapy had earned recognition from the American Fertility Society, and her preliminary trials had been peer-reviewed and approved by multiple ethics boards. But it was the personal details that intrigued him most. Photos from medical conferences showed a serious young woman presenting her research with quiet confidence. A brief interview in a scientific journal revealed her motivation. Too many people are told that parenthood is impossible when what they really need is someone willing to think differently about the possible. Ryan found himself studying a photo of Amora accepting an award for innovative research, her smile genuine and unguarded in a way that the professional headshots couldn't capture. There was something about her, a combination of vulnerability and strength, that called to him on a level deeper than their shared scientific goals. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Thank you for listening tonight. Whatever you decide, I meant what I said about your determination. That quality alone makes you father material. Amora. Ryan stared at the message for a long time. No one had called him father material since his diagnosis. Even he had stopped believing it was possible. He typed and deleted a dozen responses before settling on, "Thank you for giving me hope again. I'll have an answer for you soon." As he prepared for bed that night, Ryan caught himself doing something he hadn't done in months, planning for a future that included children. He found himself wondering what his genetics combined with Amora's might produce, what kind of parents they might be together, whether their children would have his gray eyes or her warm brown ones. For the first time since Vanessa had walked out of his life, Ryan Mitchell fell asleep with a smile on his face. The next morning brought clarity along with the Seattle sunshine breaking through the storm clouds. Ryan woke up knowing what his answer would be, but he spent the day doing due diligence anyway. He consulted with 2 independent fertility specialists about Amora's research, had his lawyer review the ethical and legal implications, and even hired a private investigator to verify her background. Every piece of information confirmed what his instincts had told him the night before. Amora Johnson was exactly who she claimed to be, a brilliant scientist with a personal stake in solving the puzzle that had defeated them both. That evening, he called her, "Dr. Johnson. This is Ryan Mitchell. I've made my decision." And her voice was carefully neutral, but he could hear the tension underneath. "When do we start?" 3 weeks into the preparation phase, Ryan's life had been turned upside down in ways he never could have anticipated. The penthouse that had once felt like a sterile monument to his success now hummed with activity. Medical equipment, research papers, and Amora's personal belongings scattered throughout as they worked together on the most ambitious project of both their lives. "Your hormone levels are responding better than I expected," Amora said, reviewing the latest lab results on her laptop. She sat cross-legged on his leather sofa, wearing jeans and a Northwestern University sweatshirt, her hair falling in loose waves around her shoulders. The transformation from the polished professional who'd knocked on his door to this comfortable, intimate version of herself had happened gradually, but it struck Ryan anew each morning when she arrived with coffee and updates. "Is that good or concerning?" Ryan asked, settling beside her with his own cup of coffee. The morning routine had developed naturally. Amora would arrive at 7 with lab results and treatment schedules. They'd review the data together, then proceed with whatever procedures the day required. "It's very good. Your body is adapting to the genetic scaffolding therapy faster than our most optimistic projections." She turned the laptop screen toward him, pointing to a series of graphs that might as well have been abstract art for all he understood them. "See this uptick here? That's your cellular regeneration response. And this spike indicates that the artificial genetic carriers are integrating successfully." Ryan studied her face as she explained the science, noting the way her eyes lit up when discussing her work, the unconscious way she bit her lower lip when concentrating. Living in close quarters for the treatment had revealed layers to Amora that her professional demeanor had hidden. Her habit of humming while reviewing data, her tendency to gesture wildly when excited, the way she made terrible jokes to lighten the mood during difficult procedures. "What about your levels?" he asked. Amora's expression grew more guarded. "They're progressing." "That's not an answer." She sighed and pulled up another set of charts. "My body is fighting the hormone therapy more than expected. Dr. Harrison thinks it might be stress-related, but we're monitoring it closely." Ryan felt a familiar stab of anxiety. Over the past 3 weeks, he'd grown protective of Amora in ways that surprised him. She'd moved into his guest room to make the daily treatments more convenient, and somewhere between shared morning coffee and late-night research sessions, she'd become more than just his medical partner. "Define closely," he said. "Daily blood work, twice-weekly ultrasounds, and some additional medications to help my system adjust." Amora closed the laptop and leaned back against the sofa cushions. "Ryan, I knew this would be challenging when I proposed it. My body chemistry is more complex than yours because I'm the one who'll be carrying the pregnancy." The word pregnancy still sent a thrill through Ryan every time she said it. After months of being told it was impossible, the mere possibility felt miraculous. Have you ever had to decide between playing it safe and taking a leap of faith that could change everything? What made you choose? Let us know in the comments. Their partnership had begun as a scientific collaboration, but the domestic intimacy of the past 3 weeks had created something neither had planned for. Ryan found himself looking forward to Amora's arrival each morning, not just for the medical updates but for her presence. The way she made his sterile penthouse feel like a home, how she listened to his work frustrations with genuine interest, the comfortable silences they'd learned to share. "I have a confession," Amora said suddenly, breaking into his thoughts. "Should I be worried? I've been thinking about names." Ryan felt his heart skip. Names. "I know it's premature, and I know we agreed to focus on the science first, but—" She shrugged, a blush creeping up her neck. "I can't help myself. When I'm lying in bed at night after the treatments, I find myself wondering what we'd call them. Them. The babies. If this works, if we really do get multiples like the trials suggest, what would we name them? Ryan had been having the same forbidden thoughts but hadn't dared voice them. The casual way she included him in future planning made his chest tight with emotion. Vanessa had planned their hypothetical children's lives down to their college choices, but she'd never once asked for his input on names or nursery colors or any of the intimate details that made a child feel real. I'd like that, he said quietly. Though I should warn you, my naming skills are questionable. I once named a goldfish fish. Amora laughed, the sound bright and genuine. Well, we'll work on your creativity. The moment was interrupted by Dr. Harrison's arrival for their weekly progress evaluation. The fertility specialist had become a regular fixture in Ryan's penthouse, monitoring their response to the experimental treatment with the enthusiasm of a researcher witnessing medical history. How are we feeling today? Dr. Harrison asked as he set up his portable ultrasound equipment. Optimistic, Amora replied, though Ryan caught the slight tension in her voice. Amora, your levels are still fluctuating more than I'd like to see, Dr. Harrison said after reviewing the ultrasound images. I'm going to recommend increasing your supplemental hormone dosage and adding a new medication to help stabilize your system. What kind of side effects are we talking about? Ryan asked. Nausea, fatigue, possible mood swings, and some abdominal discomfort. Nothing dangerous, but it won't be pleasant. Ryan watched Amora's face as she processed the information. He'd learned to read her expressions over the past weeks, the microflinch when receiving difficult news, the way she pressed her lips together when worried, the determined set of her jaw when facing a challenge. How much will this delay the procedure? She asked. If your body responds well to the new medication, we should still be on track for next month. But Amora, I need you to be honest with me about how you're feeling. Any unusual symptoms, any concerns at all? After Dr. Harrison left, the atmosphere in the penthouse felt heavier. Amora became unusually quiet, busying herself organizing medical supplies and updating their treatment calendar, but Ryan could sense her growing anxiety. The next few days brought a new level of challenge as Amora's body struggled with the increased hormone therapy. The stronger medications hit her system hard, nausea that kept her in bed until noon, mood swings that left her crying over commercials, and fatigue that made even simple tasks exhausting. Ryan found himself in the unfamiliar role of caregiver, bringing her ginger tea for the nausea, holding her hair back when the morning sickness became overwhelming, and simply being present during the emotional roller coaster of hormonal adjustment. I'm sorry you have to see me like this, Amora said weakly from the guest bed where she'd spent most of the day. Like what? Weak. Pathetic. Not the confident scientist you agreed to partner with. Ryan sat on the edge of the bed and brushed her hair away from her face. You're the strongest person I know. You're literally reshaping your body chemistry to create life. There's nothing weak about that. But privately, Ryan was terrified. Watching Amora suffer through the side effects brought back every fear he'd buried about the risk she was taking. What if her body couldn't handle the treatment? What if they were pushing too hard, too fast? What if he lost both his last chance at fatherhood and the woman who'd become the center of his world? The crisis came on a Thursday morning when Amora collapsed in his kitchen while making coffee. Ryan found her on the floor, conscious but pale and shaking, her skin clammy with perspiration. Call Dr. Harrison, she whispered as he helped her to the sofa. The next few hours passed in a blur of emergency medical consultations and frantic phone calls. Dr. Harrison arrived within an hour, accompanied by a portable medical team that turned Ryan's living room into a makeshift examination room. Her hormone levels spiked overnight, Dr. Harrison explained after completing his examination. It's not uncommon with the new medication, but we need to adjust the dosage immediately. Is she going to be okay? Ryan asked, watching as the medical team administered for fluids and medications. She should be fine, but this changes our timeline. We need to either proceed with the procedure within the next few days, or postpone for another month to let her system recalibrate. Ryan felt the weight of decision settling on his shoulders. They'd come so far, invested so much physically and emotionally in this project. But watching Amora struggle with the treatment had shown him something he'd been trying to ignore. His feelings for her had grown far beyond their scientific partnership. "What do you recommend?" he asked. "Medically, I think we should proceed. Her body is actually responding well to the treatment, despite the dramatic side effects. But emotionally..." Dr. Harrison paused, studying Ryan's face. "This is a decision you and Amora need to make together." When the medical team left, Ryan sat beside Amora on the sofa, watching her slowly regain her strength as the 4 fluids took effect. "Talk to me," he said gently. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not of the procedure or the risks or even the possibility of failure. I'm scared that my body is going to let us down, that after all this preparation and hope and planning, I won't be able to hold up my end of the bargain." "Your body isn't letting anyone down. You're asking it to do something that's never been done before. But what if it's not enough? What if we've come this far only to fail at the final moment?" Ryan took her hands in his, noting how small they felt despite everything she'd accomplished. "Then we try again. Or we find another way. Or we face whatever comes next together." The word together hung between them, carrying more weight than either had intended when they'd first shaken hands on this partnership. "Ryan," Amora said softly, "what happens if this works? I mean, really works. What happens between us?" It was the question they'd both been avoiding, the elephant in the room that grew larger with each passing day of domestic intimacy and shared dreams. "I don't know," he said honestly. "But I know I don't want you to disappear from my life once the babies are born. Whether we're co-parents or friends or something else entirely, I want you in this with me for the long haul." Amora reached up and touched his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "I want that too. More than I probably should." The admission created a new tension between them, an acknowledgement of feelings that neither had planned for but both had been developing. Ryan found himself studying her face, the curve of her cheekbones, the way her dark eyes reflected the afternoon sunlight streaming through his windows, the vulnerable expression that replaced her usual scientific confidence. "Should we be worried about this?" he asked, gesturing vaguely between them. "Probably. But I've spent my entire adult life being careful and practical and making safe choices. This whole project is the most reckless thing I've ever done. So why start being sensible now?" That evening, as they shared dinner and tried to pretend everything was normal, the weight of their impending decision pressed down on both of them. Tomorrow, they would have to choose: proceed with the procedure despite the medical complications, or postpone and risk losing the momentum they'd built. "I need to tell you something," Amora said as they cleaned up after dinner. "Whatever we decide tomorrow, these past few weeks have been the happiest of my life." Ryan stopped drying dishes and turned to face her. "Even with the hormone therapy and the side effects and the uncertainty. Especially with all of that. Because it means we're building something together. Something real and important and ours." The kiss happened without either of them planning it. Soft at first, tentative, then deeper as weeks of suppressed attraction finally found expression. Ryan's hands tangled in her hair while hers pressed against his chest, and for a moment, the medical equipment and research papers and uncertain future faded away. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. "That definitely complicates things," Ryan said. "Worth it though." "Absolutely." They spent the rest of the evening talking about everything except the decision that loomed before them. Amora told him about her childhood dreams of having a large family, about watching her mother struggle with infertility, about the moment she decided to dedicate her career to helping other women achieve what her mother never could. Ryan shared his own stories, the pressure of being the only heir to the Mitchell family legacy, the way his ex-wife's departure had shattered not just his marriage but his sense of self-worth, the quiet desperation that had been eating away at him for months before Amora knocked on his door. "I was giving up," he admitted as they sat together on his balcony, watching the city lights twinkle below. Before you came along, I was ready to accept that fatherhood just wasn't meant for me. And now I can't imagine my life without this chance. Without you. The next morning brought clarity along with the Seattle sunshine breaking through the storm clouds. Ryan woke up knowing what his answer would be, but he waited for Amora to make her own decision. She emerged from the guest room looking pale but determined, her hair pulled back in the simple ponytail that had become familiar over their weeks together. I want to do this, she said without preamble. I want to proceed with the procedure. Are you sure? We don't have to rush. Yes, we do. Amora moved to stand beside him at the kitchen counter, accepting the coffee he offered. My body is as ready as it's going to be. The hormone levels are stabilized, the genetic scaffolding is in place, and if we wait another month, we'll have to start the entire preparation process over again. Ryan studied her face, looking for any sign of doubt or uncertainty. Instead, he saw the same quiet determination that had brought her to his door with an impossible proposal. There's something else, she continued. I don't want to do this just as research partners anymore. I want to do this as us. Whatever that means. Ryan set down his coffee and pulled her into his arms, holding her close and breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo. Are you asking me to be your boyfriend while we attempt to create babies together through experimental genetic therapy? When you put it like that, it sounds completely insane. I've never wanted anything more in my life. What do you think makes a successful partnership when two people have to build something completely new together? Share your thoughts about unconventional families in the comments. They called Dr. Harrison together, sitting side by side on the sofa with Amora's hand clasped firmly in Ryan's. We want to proceed, Amora announced when the doctor answered. Are you both certain? After yesterday's complications, I want to make sure you're not rushing into this decision. Ryan and Amora exchanged a look that carried the weight of everything they'd shared, the late-night conversations, the growing trust, the fragile hope they'd built together brick by brick. We're certain, Ryan said. When can we schedule the procedure? Day after tomorrow, if Amora's levels remain stable. I'll need you both at the clinic for final preparations tomorrow morning. After they ended the call, Ryan and Amora sat in the quiet of the penthouse, both processing the magnitude of what they'd just committed to. In 48 hours, they would attempt something that had never been done before, not just the scientific breakthrough, but the creation of a family built on love that had grown from the most unlikely circumstances. Are you scared? Amora asked. Terrified, Ryan admitted. But not of the procedure failing. I'm scared of how much I want this to work. How much I want us to work. Amora leaned against his shoulder, and Ryan wrapped his arms around her, holding her close as they faced the unknown together. Outside the windows, Seattle hummed with its usual energy, but inside the penthouse, time seemed suspended, a perfect moment of anticipation before everything would change forever. Whatever happens, Amora said softly, I'm glad it's you I'm doing this with. Me too, Ryan replied, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. Me too. The morning of the procedure dawned gray and misty, Seattle's typical November weather matching the nervous energy that had settled over Ryan's penthouse like a shroud. Neither he nor Amora had slept well, both too wired with anticipation and anxiety to find rest. They'd spent the night talking in quiet voices about everything except what was about to happen, as if speaking their hopes aloud might jinx the entire endeavor. Ryan stood at his kitchen window, watching the first commuters navigate the rain-slick streets below, their headlights cutting through the pre-dawn darkness. His coffee sat untouched on the counter, his stomach too knotted with nerves to handle caffeine. Today would either fulfill every dream he'd carried for years or destroy the last vestige of hope he'd allowed himself to feel. You're up early, Amora's voice came from behind him, soft and slightly hoarse from the sleepless night. He turned to find her standing in the kitchen doorway, wearing the simple cotton dress Dr. Harrison had recommended, easy to remove and comfortable for the hours of monitoring that would follow the procedure. She'd pulled her hair back in a simple ponytail, and without makeup, she looked younger and more vulnerable than Ryan had ever seen her. Couldn't sleep, he admitted, moving to pour her the herbal tea Dr. Harrison had prescribed instead of her usual coffee. "How are you feeling?" "Like I'm about to either make medical history or become a very expensive cautionary tale." Amora accepted the tea gratefully, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. "My grandmother used to say that the scariest moments in life are just before the most beautiful ones." Smart woman. She was. She'd have liked you. Amora sipped her tea, studying Ryan's face over the rim of the mug. "You look like you're about to throw up." "I might. Is that normal for the male partner in experimental genetic procedures?" "I have no idea. We're writing the book as we go." The attempt at levity fell flat, both of them too aware of the magnitude of what lay ahead. Ryan moved to stand beside her, and without discussion, they found themselves in each other's arms, not passionate or romantic, but desperate, clinging to each other like anchors in a storm. "Whatever happens today," Ryan said into her hair, "I want you to know that meeting you changed everything for me. Even if the procedure fails, even if we never have children, you gave me something I thought I'd lost forever." "What's that?" "Hope." Amora pulled back to look at him, tears already gathering in her dark eyes. "Don't talk like we're saying goodbye. We're going to walk into that clinic together, we're going to create life together, and we're going to walk out as parents-to-be. Promise." "I promise to fight for this with everything I have. The rest is up to science and fate." The private medical transport Dr. Harrison had arranged arrived precisely at 7:30, its discreet black exterior giving no hint of the revolutionary procedure it would transport them to. The driver, a kind-faced woman in her 50s, greeted them with professional warmth that helped ease some of Ryan's anxiety. "Big day," she said as they settled into the comfortable rear seats. "Dr. Harrison mentioned you're part of a groundbreaking study." "Something like that," Amora replied, her hand finding Ryan's in the space between them. The drive to the clinic passed in relative silence, both lost in their own thoughts as the city moved past the tinted windows. Ryan found himself cataloging details, the way the morning light caught in Amora's hair, the steady rhythm of her breathing, the determined set of her jaw that he'd come to associate with her facing down impossible challenges. If something went wrong today, if they lost everything they'd worked toward, he wanted to remember this moment when she was still hopeful and whole. The Pacific Northwest Fertility Research Center occupied an entire floor of a gleaming medical complex, its interior designed to project cutting-edge innovation wrapped in comfortable warmth. Dr. Harrison met them in the reception area, his usual gentle demeanor tinged with an excitement that betrayed his scientific fascination with what they were attempting. "Ready to make history?" he asked, though his tone suggested he understood the weight of the question. "As ready as anyone can be for something that's never been done before," Ryan replied. The next hour passed in a blur of final preparations. Amora underwent her last pre-procedure examination while Ryan found himself relegated to a waiting room designed to soothe anxious partners. The walls featured abstract art in calming blues and greens, and soft instrumental music played from hidden speakers, but nothing could quiet the storm of emotions churning in his chest. A nurse appeared at his side, young and professional with kind eyes that suggested she'd witnessed many pivotal moments in this place. "Mr. Mitchell, Dr. Johnson is asking for you." Ryan followed her through a maze of corridors to the procedure suite, a room that looked more like a high-tech laboratory than a medical facility. Monitors lined the walls, displaying readouts he couldn't interpret but knew were crucial to their success. Amora lay on a specialized examination table in the center of the room, surrounded by equipment that hummed with quiet efficiency. "There you are," she said when she saw him, her voice slightly thick from the pre-medication but her eyes alert and focused. "I was starting to think you'd run away." "Not a chance." Ryan moved to her side, careful not to disturb the forelines that snaked from her arms to bags of medications he couldn't pronounce. "How are you feeling?" "Like I'm floating a little, but still here. The medication is supposed to keep me comfortable but conscious throughout the procedure." Dr. Harrison entered the room followed by his team, Dr. Sarah Chen, the geneticist they'd consulted with throughout the process, Dr. Michael Torres, an anesthesiologist who specialized in conscious sedation, and Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a reproductive endocrinologist who'd flown in from Johns Hopkins specifically for this procedure. Amora, Ryan, I want to walk you through exactly what's going to happen over the next few hours, Dr. Harrison said, his voice taking on the careful cadence of a surgeon explaining a complex operation. The genetic scaffolding process requires precision timing and careful monitoring at every stage. He gestured to a large monitor displaying images that looked like abstract art but represented months of Amora's theoretical work made manifest. We'll begin with the final preparation of Ryan's genetic material, which has been enhanced through the pre-treatment process. Simultaneously, we'll harvest Amora's prepared ova, which have been primed through the hormone therapy. Ryan felt his palms growing sweaty as the reality of the moment settled over him. This wasn't theoretical anymore. They were actually going to attempt something that had never been done before, gambling everything on Amora's revolutionary technique. The critical phase, Dr. Harrison continued, involves the integration of the artificial genetic carriers with both sets of genetic material. This process takes approximately 45 minutes and requires Amora to remain conscious and responsive throughout. Why conscious? Ryan asked, though he knew the answer from their previous discussions. The genetic scaffolding responds to bioelectric signals from the nervous system, Dr. Chen explained. Amora's conscious participation actually enhances the integration process. Her body needs to actively accept the artificial carriers. Amora squeezed Ryan's hand. We've prepared for this. I'm ready. The first phase of the procedure began with Ryan's contribution to their shared future. He was escorted to a private room where the familiar routine of genetic collection took place, made more complex by the enhancement protocols they'd been following for weeks. The process itself was straightforward, but the emotional weight of knowing this might be his last chance at biological fatherhood made every moment feel monumental. When he returned to the procedure suite, the real work had begun. Dr. Chen worked at a specialized laboratory station, combining Ryan's genetic material with the artificial carriers Amora had developed. The process looked like something from a science fiction film. Precise measurements, controlled environments, technology that pushed the boundaries of what medical science thought possible. Integration is beginning, Dr. Chen announced, her voice carrying the excitement of a researcher witnessing something unprecedented. The artificial carriers are accepting the genetic material better than our best projections. Ryan took his position beside Amora's bed, her hand immediately finding his. The medications had relaxed her, but her grip was still strong, still determined. How are you doing? He asked softly. I can feel it, she said wonderingly. I can actually feel the process beginning. It's like my body is waking up to something it was always meant to do. The integration phase was the longest 45 minutes of Ryan's life. He stood beside Amora's bed, holding her hand and watching the monitors that tracked her vital signs, the genetic integration process, and a dozen other parameters he didn't understand but knew were crucial to their success. Amora drifted between clear consciousness and medication-induced haze, sometimes squeezing his hand in response to the sensations of the procedure, sometimes murmuring reassurances that were more for his benefit than hers. The medical team worked with quiet efficiency, making micro-adjustments to medications and monitoring equipment while Dr. Harrison provided a steady stream of updates. 10 minutes in, integration proceeding normally, he announced. Genetic carriers are binding successfully with the enhanced material. 20 minutes. Cellular response is excellent. Better than our laboratory projections. 30 minutes. We're seeing unprecedented levels of successful integration. Amora's body is accepting the artificial carriers as if they were naturally occurring. At 35 minutes, Ryan noticed a change in the room's energy. The medical team moved with more focused intensity, and Dr. Harrison's updates became more frequent and technical. What's happening? Ryan asked, trying to read the expressions behind the surgical masks. Something we didn't expect, Dr. Harrison replied, his voice carrying wonder and excitement. The integration isn't just successful, it's exceeding every parameter we established. The artificial carriers aren't just facilitating genetic combination, they're enhancing it. Is that good or bad? It's extraordinary. Amora's body is responding to the genetic scaffolding in ways that suggest multiple successful integrations. Multiple. Ryan's heart began racing. How multiple? We won't know for certain until the process completes, but the indicators suggest your theoretical possibility of multiple embryos may become reality. The final 10 minutes of the integration phase passed in tense silence. Everyone in the room focused on the monitors that would determine whether months of preparation and hope would culminate in success or failure. Amora's hand gripped Ryan's with surprising strength for someone under sedation, as if she understood the critical nature of these final moments. Integration complete, Dr. Chen announced at exactly 45 minutes. All carriers have successfully bonded. Beginning implantation sequence. The implantation process itself was relatively quick, a 15-minute procedure that involved placing the integrated genetic material into Amora's prepared uterine environment. But those 15 minutes felt eternal to Ryan, who watched every micro-expression on the medical team's faces for clues about their success. Implantation successful, Dr. Harrison finally announced. Multiple integration sites are showing positive indicators for embryonic development. How many sites? Amora asked, more alert now as the procedure concluded. We'll need to wait for cellular division to begin before we can give you definitive numbers, but preliminary scans suggest at least 2, possibly 3 successful implantations. Ryan felt his knees go weak. After years of being told fatherhood was impossible, the possibility of not just one but multiple children felt overwhelming. The next 6 hours passed in careful monitoring as they waited for the first signs of embryonic development. Amora dozed fitfully under the influence of post-procedure medications while Ryan maintained a vigil beside her bed, watching the readouts that tracked the most important numbers of their lives. Dr. Harrison appeared every hour with updates that grew progressively more exciting. The integrated genetic material wasn't just viable, it was thriving, responding to Amora's enhanced hormonal environment with remarkable success. Cellular division has begun, he announced during his 4 o'clock visit. All integration sites are showing positive development. All? Ryan asked. All 3. Ryan, Amora, what you've accomplished today goes beyond anything we thought possible. This isn't just a successful fertility treatment, it's a revolution in reproductive science. But Ryan barely heard the scientific implications. His focus was entirely on the number. 3. 3 potential children. 3 chances at the family he'd dreamed of. At 6 o'clock, Dr. Harrison returned with an ultrasound machine, his excitement barely contained. It's early, he cautioned as he prepared the equipment, but the cellular development has progressed enough for our first real visualization. Amora was fully awake now, the medications having cleared enough for her to focus clearly. She reached for Ryan's hand as Dr. Harrison positioned the ultrasound wand. The screen flickered to life, showing the familiar black and white imagery that Ryan had learned to interpret over months of failed fertility treatments. But this time, instead of the empty darkness that had characterized all his previous examinations, the screen showed unmistakable signs of life. There, Dr. Harrison said, his voice thick with emotion as he pointed to a small cluster of rapidly dividing cells. That's your first successful embryo. Ryan stared at the screen, hardly believing what he was seeing. After years of empty ultrasounds and devastating disappointments, there was finally something there. Something that represented the beginning of everything he dreamed of. And there, Dr. Harrison continued, moving the ultrasound wand slightly, is your second embryo. Second. Amora's voice cracked with disbelief. And there's your third. The room fell silent except for the steady beeping of medical equipment and the sound of Amora's sharp intake of breath. Ryan stared at the screen, counting and recounting the 3 distinct clusters of dividing cells that represented 3 separate lives beginning simultaneously. Triplets, he whispered, the word feeling foreign and miraculous on his tongue. Triplets, Dr. Harrison confirmed, his professional composure cracking to reveal genuine joy. 3 healthy, viable embryos, all developing normally. This is the most successful outcome we could have hoped for. Ryan looked down at Amora to find tears streaming down her face, her free hand pressed to her mouth in shock and joy. All the weeks of preparation, the hormone therapy, the experimental procedures, the growing love between them, everything had led to this moment of impossible triumph. "We did it," she said through her tears, her voice barely audible. "We actually did it." Ryan leaned down and kissed her, tasting salt and joy and the promise of everything they dreamed of. When they broke apart, he pressed his forehead against hers, both of them crying and laughing and trying to process the magnitude of what had just happened. "I love you," he said, the words slipping out naturally, feeling absolutely right in the moment. "I love you too," Amora replied without hesitation. "I love you, and I love them, and I love this impossible, beautiful thing we've created together." Dr. Harrison cleared his throat gently, though his eyes were suspiciously bright. "I'll give you two some time to process this, but I do need to discuss immediate next steps. With triplets, we'll need to implement enhanced monitoring protocols from the very beginning." But Ryan barely heard the medical details. His attention was focused entirely on Amora, brilliant, brave Amora who'd risked everything to give them this chance, and on the ultrasound screen that showed 3 tiny miracles developing in defiance of every medical expert who'd told him fatherhood was impossible. 3 babies, Amora said wonderingly, her hand moving to rest on her still flat stomach where their children were already growing. "Ryan, we're going to have 3 babies." 3 babies, he repeated, the words feeling surreal and wonderful and terrifying all at once. 3 children who are going to call me Dad. As the evening wore on and the medical team completed their monitoring protocols, Ryan found himself making mental adjustments to every plan he'd ever made. 3 cribs instead of 1. 3 college funds. 3 Christmas stockings. 3 little faces that would be a perfect blend of his features and Amora's. But more than that, he found himself reimagining his entire future. This wasn't just about becoming a father, it was about becoming a family with the woman who'd become the center of his world, creating something beautiful and lasting from love that had grown in the most unexpected circumstances. "Thank you," he whispered to Amora as she dozed peacefully for the first time in weeks, her hands still resting protectively over their growing family. "For what?" she murmured without opening her eyes. "For knocking on my door that night. For believing this was possible when I'd given up. For giving me everything I never dared to dream of." Amora opened her eyes and smiled at him with such radiant joy that Ryan felt his heart expand to accommodate feelings he'd never experienced before. "Thank you for saying yes to the impossible," she replied. "Thank you for taking this leap with me." Outside the clinic windows, Seattle sparkled with evening lights, and for the first time in years, Ryan Mitchell looked toward the future with unqualified joy. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, a high-risk pregnancy, the complexities of preparing for triplets, the navigation of their evolving relationship. But tonight, surrounded by the quiet hum of medical equipment and the woman he loved, Ryan felt the profound peace of dreams fulfilled. 3 heartbeats. 3 lives. 3 chances at the happiness that had seemed impossible just months ago. Everything had changed, and everything was perfect. 6 months later, the morning sun streamed through the windows of Ryan's penthouse, now transformed into something he'd never imagined possible, a home filled with love, laughter, and the controlled chaos that came with preparing for triplets. Baby furniture occupied every spare corner, medical monitoring equipment shared space with cribs and changing tables, and the sterile bachelor pad had evolved into a warm sanctuary designed for the family they were about to welcome. Ryan stood in the doorway of what had once been his home office, now converted into a nursery painted in soft yellows and greens. 3 cribs lined one wall, each adorned with carefully chosen bedding and the mobile Amora had insisted would stimulate their babies' developing minds. Above each crib hung a framed photograph from one of their many ultrasound appointments, images that had become progressively clearer as their children grew. "They're going to be here so soon," Amora said from behind him, her voice carrying the mixture of excitement and exhaustion that had characterized the final weeks of her pregnancy. Ryan turned to find her standing in the doorway, one hand supporting her considerable belly while the other held a cup of the herbal tea that had become a staple of her daily routine. At 34 weeks pregnant with triplets, she was magnificent, glowing with the health of a successful high-risk pregnancy, but clearly ready for their children to make their appearance. Dr. Harrison thinks it could be any day now, Ryan said, moving to wrap his arms around her from behind, his hands settling over hers on her belly. Are you ready? I've been ready since the moment we saw them on that ultrasound screen 6 months ago. The pregnancy had been a journey of constant monitoring, weekly doctor visits, and careful attention to every detail of Amora's health. Ryan had thrown himself into the role of devoted partner with the same intensity he'd once reserved for business deals, attending every appointment, researching every aspect of multiple pregnancy care, and ensuring Amora had everything she needed. They'd also navigated the complex emotional landscape of their evolving relationship. What had begun as a scientific partnership and grown into love had deepened into something neither had expected, a bond forged by shared purpose, mutual respect, and the daily intimacy of building a family together. Your brother called this morning, Amora said, leaning back against Ryan's chest. He wants to know if we've finalized the names. Have we? I think so. Zoe Michelle, Sophia Grace, and Jacob Ryan, Ryan finished, his voice soft with emotion. They'd spent months deliberating over names, finally settling on choices that honored both their families and their shared hopes for their children's futures. Jacob Ryan Mitchell Johnson, Amora corrected gently. They'd decided to hyphenate the children's last names, a symbol of their equal partnership in creating this family. It was one of many decisions they'd made together, from the practical matters of legal guardianship and financial planning to the intimate choices of how they wanted to raise their children. The sound of Ryan's phone buzzing interrupted their quiet moment. Dr. Harrison's name appeared on the screen, and both of them tensed slightly. Late-stage pregnancy calls from their doctor usually meant one thing. Dr. Harrison, Ryan answered, putting the call on speaker. Good morning, you two. How is Amora feeling today? Tired, uncomfortable, and definitely ready for these babies to make their grand entrance, Amora replied, her hand unconsciously rubbing her lower back. That's actually why I'm calling. Your lab results from yesterday show some indicators that suggest we might want to consider delivery sooner rather than later. Nothing concerning, he added quickly, but at 34 weeks with triplets, we're well within the safe zone for delivery, and I think your body is telling us it's time. Ryan felt his heart rate spike. They'd known this moment was coming, had prepared for it extensively, but the reality of immediate parenthood still felt surreal. How soon are we talking? He asked. I'd like you to come in this afternoon for a final evaluation. If everything looks good, we could schedule delivery for tomorrow morning. Tomorrow? Amora's voice cracked slightly. As in, we could meet our babies tomorrow. Very likely, yes. I know it feels sudden, but remember, this is exactly what we've been working toward. Your pregnancy has been textbook perfect for a high-risk multiple birth. The babies are healthy, you're healthy, and your body is ready. After they ended the call, Ryan and Amora stood in the nursery, both processing the magnitude of what they'd just learned. Tomorrow, they would become parents. Tomorrow, their theoretical family would become reality. I need to call my mother, Amora said suddenly, reaching for her phone. And Jake and your parents, and... Breathe, Ryan said gently, taking her hands in his. We have time. Let's take this one step at a time. The rest of the day passed in a blur of preparations. Hospital bags were packed and repacked, family members were notified, and final arrangements were made for the delivery that would require a full medical team due to the complexity of triplet birth. That evening, they sat together on their balcony, watching the sunset paint Seattle's skyline in shades of gold and pink. The city spread out below them, millions of people going about their daily lives, unaware that tomorrow would bring the most important moment in Ryan and Amora's existence. Are you scared? Amora asked, her head resting on Ryan's shoulder. Terrified, he admitted. But not of being a father. I'm scared of how much I love them already, how much I love you. I'm scared of how perfect this feels when I spent so long believing I'd never have it. Vanessa was wrong about you, you know, Amora said quietly. She was wrong about so many things, but especially about your capacity for love and family. You're going to be an incredible father. Ryan felt the familiar tightness in his chest that came whenever he thought about how different his life might have been if his ex-wife hadn't left, if he'd never met Amora, if they'd never taken the impossible leap that led them here. I used to think she broke something in me, he said. That her leaving proved I wasn't meant to be a husband or father. But now I realize she just wasn't the right person to build this kind of life with. Everything happens for a reason, Amora murmured. Even the painful things. Especially the painful things. The next morning, the delivery room at Seattle General Hospital buzzed with controlled activity as the medical team prepared for the complex procedure of delivering healthy triplets. Dr. Harrison led a team of specialists that included neonatologists, surgical nurses, and anesthesiologists, everyone working in choreographed precision to ensure the safe arrival of the Mitchell-Johnson triplets. Ryan stood beside Amora's bed, wearing surgical scrubs and holding her hand as she prepared for the cesarean section that would bring their children into the world. The months of preparation, the experimental treatment, the careful monitoring, everything had led to this moment. Ready to meet your babies? Dr. Harrison asked, his voice carrying the excitement of someone about to witness the culmination of a medical miracle. We've been ready for a lifetime, Amora replied, squeezing Ryan's hand. The procedure itself was swift and efficient, a testament to Dr. Harrison's skill and the preparation of his team. But for Ryan, time seemed suspended as he watched the process that would transform him from a man who'd been told fatherhood was impossible into the father of 3 children. Here comes baby number 1, Dr. Harrison announced. The first cry pierced the air, strong, healthy, unmistakably alive. Ryan felt tears streaming down his face as he watched Dr. Harrison lift a tiny, perfect baby girl into view. Zoe, Amora whispered, her voice thick with emotion. And baby number 2, Dr. Harrison continued, working with practiced efficiency. Another cry, equally strong and demanding. Another perfect daughter. Sophia, Ryan said, his voice barely audible. And baby number 3. The third cry was different, deeper, more insistent. Ryan watched as Dr. Harrison lifted their son into the air, tiny but perfect, announcing his arrival with impressive volume. Jacob, they said together, both crying and laughing as they heard their children's voices for the first time. The next few minutes passed in a whirlwind of medical activity as the babies were cleaned, weighed, and assessed by the neonatal team. Ryan found himself torn between staying with Amora as she was sewn up and following his children to their first medical examinations. Go, Amora said, reading his expression. Go meet our babies. I'll be right here. Ryan followed the neonatal team to the warming stations where his children lay under heat lamps, tiny and perfect and more beautiful than anything he'd ever imagined. Zoe, born first at 5 pounds 2 ounces, had Amora's delicate features and a crown of dark hair. Sophia, weighing 5 pounds even, seemed to have inherited Ryan's grey eyes and a determined expression that suggested she would be formidable. Jacob, the largest at 5 pounds 6 ounces, was a perfect blend of both parents, with Amora's skin tone and Ryan's strong jawline. They're perfect, he whispered to the neonatal nurse, unable to take his eyes off his children. Absolutely perfect, she agreed. Strong, healthy, and ready to go home with their parents in a few days. When Ryan returned to Amora's side, she was alert and eager for news about their babies. Tell me everything, she demanded. Ryan described each child in detail, their weights, their features, the way they'd already begun showing distinct personalities even in their first minutes of life. As he spoke, he watched Amora's face light up with joy and love, her exhaustion forgotten in the excitement of becoming a mother. When can I see them? She asked. The nurses are bringing them over now. The next few minutes were among the most profound of Ryan's life as he watched Amora hold their children for the first time. She cradled each baby with natural grace, speaking to them in soft tones, welcoming them to the world with tears of joy streaming down her face. When it was Ryan's turn to hold his children, he felt a transformation unlike anything he'd ever experienced. The moment Zoe's tiny hand wrapped around his finger, the moment Sophia looked up at him with unfocused but somehow knowing eyes, the moment Jacob settled against his chest with complete trust, Ryan understood what he'd been missing his entire life. This was love in its purest form. This was purpose. This was home. What moment in your life completely changed your perspective on what was possible? Share your transformation stories in the comments below. The family dinner Ryan and Amora had planned was meant to be a simple introduction of the babies to their immediate family members. Jake and his wife Sarah had driven up from Portland, Ryan's parents had flown in from San Francisco, and Amora's mother had arrived from Oakland. Everyone was eager to meet the triplets who had already become the center of their extended family's universe. What none of the visiting family members knew was the surprise Ryan and Amora had planned, a photo session to capture their first official family portrait, and their first opportunity to show off the children who represented the impossible dream made real. The setting was perfect, the sprawling backyard of the house Ryan had purchased the week after the babies were born, trading his penthouse for a family home with enough space for cribs, toys, and the chaos of raising triplets. The autumn afternoon provided soft, golden light, and the excitement in the air was palpable. Ryan emerged from the house first, wearing a crisp white dress shirt and dark pants, his face glowing with the happiness that had become his constant expression since becoming a father. He moved with confident grace to the center of the yard, positioning himself for the reveal he and Amora had orchestrated. "Okay, everyone," Amora called from the house, her voice carrying the excitement she could barely contain. "Are you ready to meet the Mitchell-Johnson triplets?" Jake and Sarah stood nearby, hands clasped together in anticipation. Ryan's parents positioned themselves where they could get the best view, his mother already reaching for tissues. Amora's mother stood beside them, her camera ready to capture every moment. Then Amora appeared. She wore a beautiful coral pink blouse that complemented her glowing skin, her hair styled in loose waves that framed her radiant face. But it was what she was carrying that made everyone gasp in delighted surprise. In her arms, dressed in matching bright yellow outfits that made them look like three tiny sunbeams, were Zoe, Sophia, and Jacob Mitchell-Johnson. The babies were alert and content, their eyes bright as they took in the faces of their extended family for the first time. But the real surprise came when Ryan stepped forward and carefully took all three babies into his strong arms, cradling them against his chest with the practiced ease of a devoted father. The sight of this successful, powerful man holding three tiny babies with such tenderness and joy was breathtaking. The reaction from their family was immediate and overwhelming. Sarah's hands flew to her mouth in amazement, her eyes wide with shock and delight. Jake stood frozen for a moment before breaking into the biggest smile Ryan had ever seen. Ryan's mother openly wept with joy, while his father's usual stoic demeanor cracked completely. Amora's mother was openly crying and laughing simultaneously, trying to capture every moment with her camera while processing the beautiful scene before her. "3 babies," Sarah whispered, her voice filled with wonder. "You have 3 perfect babies." "Triplets," Ryan said, his voice thick with emotion and pride. "Zoe, Sophia, and Jacob. Our miracle babies." The golden afternoon light caught the scene perfectly as Ryan stood surrounded by his family, holding the 3 children who represented everything he'd thought was impossible. Amora moved to stand beside him, her arm wrapping around his waist as she looked up at him with pure love and admiration. "I can't believe this is real," Jake said, moving closer to get a better look at his new nieces and nephew. "When you told us you were having a baby, we never imagined 3 of them." "Neither did we," Amora laughed, remembering those early days when they'd hoped for just 1 successful pregnancy. "The genetic therapy exceeded every expectation we had." Ryan's mother approached carefully, her hands trembling as she reached out to touch Jacob's tiny hand. "They're perfect," she whispered. Absolutely perfect. Ryan, I'm so proud of you. So happy for both of you. Can I hold one? Sarah asked eagerly, her maternal instincts clearly activated by the sight of the babies. Of course, Ryan said, carefully transferring Sophia into her waiting arms. This is Sophia Grace. She's got quite the personality already. As if on cue, Sophia looked up at Sarah with serious grey eyes, studying her new aunt with infant intensity. Sarah melted immediately, cooing over the baby while Jake peered over her shoulder with wonder. She looks just like Ryan did as a baby, Ryan's father observed, his gruff exterior completely softened by the sight of his granddaughter. And Zoe has Amora's beautiful features, Ryan's mother added, gently stroking the baby's soft cheek. The afternoon dissolved into a celebration of family, love, and new beginnings. Photos were taken in every possible combination, the babies with their grandparents, aunts, and uncle, and countless shots of Ryan and Amora together with their children. The golden light of the autumn day seemed to bless every moment, creating memories that would be treasured for generations. As the sun began to set and their family prepared to head back to their hotels, Ryan found himself standing in his backyard, holding Jacob while Amora nursed Zoe and Sophia dozed in her carrier nearby. The scene was perfectly ordinary and absolutely extraordinary, a family moment he'd dreamed of for years finally made real. Are you happy? Amora asked softly, looking up at him from where she sat in the comfortable outdoor chair he'd bought specifically for feeding sessions. Happy doesn't begin to cover it, Ryan replied, adjusting Jacob's tiny yellow outfit. I keep waiting for someone to tell me this is all a dream, that it's too good to be true. It's real, Amora assured him. We're real. This family we built together, it's the most real thing in the world. Ryan looked around at the evidence of their new life. Baby blankets scattered on the grass, bottles drying on the outdoor table, the sound of his mother inside cooing over one of the babies. 6 months ago, his life had been sterile perfection with no real meaning. Now it was beautiful chaos filled with purpose and love. I need to tell you something, he said, settling into the chair beside Amora. When Vanessa left, she said I was broken. That I would never be able to give a woman the family she deserved. I believed her for so long. And now I know she was wrong about everything. I wasn't broken, I just wasn't with the right person. And this family we have, these beautiful children, this love between us, it's better than anything I ever imagined possible. Amora reached over and took his free hand, their fingers intertwining in the familiar gesture that had become second nature over the months they'd spent building their life together. You know what the best part is, she said. Tell me. This is just the beginning. We get to watch them grow up. We get to teach them about the world, see them become their own people, maybe even help them find love like we found each other. 3 teenagers at the same time, Ryan said with mock horror. What were we thinking? We were thinking that love multiplies, not divides, Amora replied, leaning over to kiss him softly. And we were right. As the stars began to appear in the darkening Seattle sky, Ryan reflected on the journey that had brought him to this moment. The devastation of his diagnosis, the pain of his divorce, the long months of believing he would never have a family, all of it had led him to Amora, to this revolutionary treatment, to these 3 perfect children who had made him a father against all odds. But more than that, it had led him to a love deeper and more meaningful than anything he'd experienced before. Amora wasn't just the mother of his children or his partner in an extraordinary medical achievement. She was his equal, his complement, his best friend, and the love of his life. Thank you, he said quietly, not for the first time and certainly not for the last. For what this time? For seeing possibilities where everyone else saw impossibilities. For believing in us when I couldn't believe in myself. For giving me everything I never dared to dream of. Thank you for saying yes to the impossible, Amora replied, echoing words she'd spoken to him months earlier. Thank you for building this beautiful, crazy, perfect life with me. Inside the house, one of the babies began to cry, and both parents smiled at the familiar sound that had become the soundtrack of their days. "Ready for another feeding session?" Amora asked, beginning to gather their things. "Ready for whatever comes next," Ryan replied, adjusting Jacob in his arms as they headed toward the house. "As long as we're doing it together." The last rays of sunlight caught the windows of their home as the Mitchell-Johnson family headed inside, where cribs waited for sleeping babies, where bottles needed preparing, where the beautiful routine of family life beckoned. It was ordinary and extraordinary, challenging and perfect, everything Ryan had been told he could never have and everything he'd never known he'd always wanted. Behind them, the autumn evening settled over their yard, where scattered baby blankets and empty bottles told the story of a perfect day, of a family celebrated, of dreams fulfilled beyond imagination. The young millionaire who had once been left for his supposed inability to father children was now a devoted father of 3, surrounded by love he'd helped create through determination, hope, and the partnership of a remarkable woman who'd seen the impossible and made it real. Sometimes, the most beautiful stories begin with the ending of something else. Sometimes, the family you're meant to have is the one you build together, one impossible dream at a time. Sometimes, love really does conquer all.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazy and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.